Really, thank you. The 8-minute video that's putting the spotlight on aggressive tactics used by undercover NYPD officers is also raising a few other questions about how officers communicate with each other out in the field.
Okay, so this was the scene on Tuesday inside of a liquor store in Boerum Hill, Brooklyn. Timothy Brown was violently taken into custody as suspected of dealing drugs. Turns out police had the wrong person. Former NYPD Assistant Chief Tariq Shepard is here with us this morning to highlight what could have been done differently during this arrest. Tariq, good to see you again.
Good morning.
You know, this is a video that's now gone viral. So many people have seen it. A lot of elected officials are speaking out against it. When you look at the video, first and foremost, as somebody who was a former assistant chief, what do you make of that interaction? Did it go too far?
Well, I think that there are parts of that video that definitely went too far. When you consider the circumstances, they think that they're making a lawful arrest of someone who sold drugs to an undercover officer. So to start, that's okay. But I think they should have slowed this down once the man believed that it wasn't him. The problem we have here is, here we go again with non-compliance leading to an escalation. Usually, to keep things peaceful, it has to start with compliance. And that's on the subject to begin with. As this thing escalated, I don't think the officers did a good job with their communication, and certainly some of the strikes that we saw by one detective, I was not comfortable with.
So what exactly should they have done in your eyes? Because if you're the subject, you say it's up to the subject to comply, but when you know you're innocent, I mean, it's hard not to react out of emotion.
Absolutely. When you've done nothing wrong, you will have those emotions. I think everybody needs to slow it down. The worst case scenario here is that those officers would have made that arrest. A supervisor has to verify that arrest, and at that point they would have realized they had the wrong guy and he would have been released, whether that was at the scene or back at a station. So it's an inconvenience, but you won't have this sort of incident taking place. So to keep things peaceful, compliance is always key.
Okay, but let's talk about the communication overall. From our understanding, they were part of an undercover operation, these two officers, and they were communicating with each other and others using WhatsApp. Now, is that common practice to talk about an operation on WhatsApp, and then once you're in it, how do you communicate with each other? Hey, stop punching the guy or whatever you may, if you don't agree with it.
Yeah, well, there's numerous problems here. First, before they even left their station to go out and do their jobs for the day, some frontline supervisors are supposed to make sure that they have all the equipment that they need to be successful and be safe out there. That starts with a radio, their vest, a taser, OC spray, all of the things that an apprehension team would need to be successful and stay safe as they approach what they think is going to be felons or violent individuals. And so they didn't have that. So what they're doing is they're communicating on WhatsApp, because at times the areas that they're working in, when they're on their radios, they may not get the best signals on those channels. So they use the WhatsApp or sometimes a Signal app to communicate with each other about the operation that's going on. And I understand that. That still is no excuse for the apprehension officers to not have a radio on them to be able to communicate with the rest of their team and a supervisor to get the help that they need.
But just to be clear, WhatsApp is commonly used for officers to communicate with each other?
We would like to see them use something else, but the reason why they're using it is because they're more comfortable with that, and it keeps it a little more private than going over the radio and talking to each other on radio. And sometimes other people come on the same channel that you're on, and that could interfere with your operation, especially at a critical moment. So they use these things to communicate with the team, but that doesn't replace the responsibility for the supervisor to make sure that they have their radios.
Yeah, who determines that protocol then in communicating?
Well, the protocol is already laid out. There's no need for policy or rule changes here.
So it doesn't change from one scenario to the next?
Right. So you may have an undercover who can have a body camera or to do his job, or a vest or a radio on him. But if you're the apprehension team, which these officers were, there's no reason for them not to have their proper equipment.
Because they come in after the fact.
They come in after
Right, they're
the
not
fact.
the undercover person who needs to look like an everyday person.
And that's
on the
how
street.
you got the mistaken identity. The undercover and those involved in the operation will give out a description. Then the apprehension team will act on that description of who just sold to that undercover officer.
So both officers have been on the force for more than 10 years. Both have previous misconduct complaints against them. You've heard some of the calls now from elected officials that said they should be fired and lose their jobs over this. Obviously, there's an investigation that plays out. Should they lose their jobs? Could they lose their jobs?
They could. I'm not going to, until their investigation is fully complete, I wouldn't say whether an officer should lose their job or not. That's going to be up to CCRB, the police commissioner, the mayor, However, what we saw here, I did say that one of the officers' behavior, I believe, was unprofessional. I do not see a need tactically to step on the guy's, the back of his knee. I do not see a need to kick him in the rear end. I do not see a need to do some of the other things. And his communication, he should know at this point in time that people do record you when you're out there.
Yeah.
Make sure that they don't interfere, but ignore them. There's no reason for him to escalate the situation with his communication. I don't believe that both officers should receive the same discipline. However, looking into there, just because you have past complaints does not mean that we have to look at what the disposition of those complaints were, what the circumstances were. So I can't make those kind of decisions on the officer's past performance.
Right. Yeah, I mean, some may say this is obviously the worst case scenario. So moving forward, what should the NYPD do in working with communities to make sure something like this doesn't happen again?
I think the first thing that you have to do is work with internally and make sure that supervisors understand, especially in these type of units, there's this tendency for supervisors to want to bond and be part of their group, but it doesn't separate the responsibility for you to be the leader. And it starts with you making sure that your officers go out there with the tools that they need to keep themselves and the public safe.
You've mentioned the supervisor a few times. Is the supervisor present in this interaction? Is he there?
The supervisor is on the scene in some capacity. Some will be with watching the operation. Some may actually go to the scene of the apprehension. But the supervisor is present. And before they even go out, there's a TAC plan that's supposed to be drawn up, laying out everything that they're supposed to be doing and the equipment that they're supposed to have, and an inspection is supposed to be done before these officers hit the street. That didn't happen here, but that protocol is in place. So there's no need for a policy change. Just follow the policy that you have.
Well, Tariq, always great to have your insight. We appreciate your time this